Now, we can break all of these different types of media down along a lot of different characteristics. I have picked 4 because I think these are 4 that matter for the internet in particular. Ease of creation. How easy is it to make a book? Let's say it's hard. Okay, so let's give it a number scale where 1 is easy and 5 is hard. Okay, so face-to-face conversation.
1.
Phil.
5.
Skype.
2. No, that's 2.
Tell me why I think it's a 2.
You have to download it.
Somebody's hasn't used it. You have to have a connection. You have to download it. Right? Think about it in comparison to a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
Like, is it the same level of ease as just walking up to Michelle and being like, "What's up?" No, it's not. So we'll go make it a 2. For some people, depending on your social situation, that might actually be a 5, right? Okay, but for people who are in college, have a lot of laptops, probably a 2 is a better scale. Okay, journal articles. 6. Yes, I agree. 6. And it depends, if that's the thing you do for a living. But let's say ease of creation in the sense of not how easy is it to actually write the thing, how easy is it to actually get it to where other people can read it. Who you know. Certainly, again, it matters on your connections and stuff, but it's hard. Let's make it a 4, maybe not as hard as a book. I promise you, I have published articles. I definitely don't have a published book, right? So I would say 4 versus 5. Radio. 2. You can call, good call. You can call into the radio. So we can also, why don't we give it a range then? Let's say it's a 2 at the bottom. Like getting a story on This American Life. I don't know, 4 or 5 maybe. Telephone.
1.
Kids these days. 1. Okay, so 100 years ago, telephone would not be a 1, right? But now, at this point, probably for most people, you have access to a telephone or a cell phone. I promise you, it is way easier in a lot of developing countries to have a telephone conversation than almost any of the others because of the ubiquity of smartphones, right, in developing countries. Texting. 1. I'm going to add a 2 just because I've met my dad. Okay, email. 1, okay. Let's give it a 1. Do we want to give it a range?
Yeah, up to 3.
Up to 3. Again, I've met my undergraduate students. I'd give that a 5. Okay, I joke, that would have more to do with creation. In terms of level of ease of actually writing a thing and then using email to get it to your recipient, it's definitely on the lower end of the scale, right? What about snail mail?
3.
Why is it a 3?
It takes time and people moving.
So it takes some time, it takes some material help, it takes some money. So it's a little bit more than a face-to-face conversation, certainly. I'm going to bracket the time thing because we're going to get to time a little bit with ease of distribution. How easy is it to kind of get it to as mass an audience as possible, right? But, so somewhere between a 2 and a 3, maybe? Yeah? Okay. Telegraph.
5.
How would you even, is that even a thing? Do people still send telegraphs? I don't know. But again, this we can flip it with the telephone. 100 years ago, this would have been a 2 or whatever. I don't know. People used to send a lot of telegraphs right? That's a thing. Discussion boards. How easy is it to just create a message in a discussion board? 1. I mean, I would say 1. I use them a lot. Maybe some people don't. So 1 to 2. One of the things that we're realizing, right, is how creator-specific this question of ease of creation is. Right, that when we're using these communication technologies, it has a lot to do with your social location, it has a lot to do with your experience, it has a lot to do with the tools that you already know how to use. I think that if you already know how to use something like email, maybe that makes something like Skype easier because you've set up an account before for a thing, right? That these skills maybe translate across communication media. What about a blog? How easy is it to make a blog?
4 to 5.
4 to 5. I wouldn't go that high, I don't think. What? Like, not like I have my own domain and stuff, but just like I went on Blogspot and made an account and write a blog.
A 2.
2 to 3? Yeah. I would give that the same, pretty close to the same as discussion boards, because most discussion board forums, you need an account and username. It's basically the same thing. Podcasts. How easy is it to make a podcast? What? 3? 3. Man, you guys are being really generous. I'm all like, don't I need to buy a microphone? Like,
Yeah.
I need like equipment and stuff. I don't have the equipment.
Record it on your phone.
Oh, okay, on your phone. Okay, so maybe with some of our particular media, the question of ease of creation is also a question of how good you want your creation to be, right? Like a podcast, if I want to make a podcast that just gets out there, like maybe the sound quality isn't that great, it's a 3, but if I want to make something of high quality, maybe it's a 5. Same with books, right? It's hard to make a book, but we say that because we're thinking about like good published books that we've read. I can write a shitty book in a weekend and self-publish it if I wanted to. So in some ways, when we think of these communication media, we're already operating from like whatever our specific framework is for what those products look like. Facebook, how easy is it to make something on Facebook, to make a message on Facebook?
Like a grammatically correct message.
See, there you're going to the quality message, the quality question again. I heard some 1s and some 2s. What about Twitter? How easy is it to make a tweet? I actually think it's harder on Twitter because I'm constantly having to be like, oh, how do I get this shorter? Whereas Facebook just lets you ramble. But what number would you give Twitter?
A 1 because Donald Trump's on there.
That made me so happy, Bella. Okay, LinkedIn. How easy is it to make a message on LinkedIn?
Very, I do it all.
So what number would you give it, Chris?
If I can do it, anyone can do it.
1.
1.
Instagram. 1. And again, these are biased like numbers as we have encountered over and over again. The question of how easy it is to make a thing depends on what technology you already own, and what kind of money you have. Do you have money to buy stamps, right, or send a package? I sent my sister a box of scarves the other day. It cost like $19. I'm just like, what is this even? Okay. Then again, I did hand somebody $19, and there's a box now in Portland, and I didn't have to go to there, so that's cool. Hello, person. Is there somebody? Oh, okay. Hi, Richard. Let's talk about ease of distribution real quick. Ease of distribution. So you made the thing. You made a book. You made snail mail, email. How easy is it to get your book message into the hands of other people? Hard? Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of factors, right? Like people have to buy it, it has to get shipped out, it's this material good, like the publisher has to publish X number of copies and send it to a place, or like somebody has to go on Amazon and buy it and then it comes to, there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of materials, a lot of processes. So what number are we going to give it? 5. Man, books are clearly the bad guy here. Okay, face-to-face conversation. How easy is it to distribute that? Yeah, I mean, like, what does distribution even mean in that case?
What about language barriers?
Ooh, okay, so we have a potential for language barriers. Distance, so we can't distribute it. In some cases, the idea of even distributing a face-to-face conversation doesn't even make sense, right? Because if you're at a distance, all of a sudden, you can't have it at all. It's almost, to me, face-to-face is almost like a binary when it comes to distribution. Like, either we're having one right now or we're not. Versus books, which is like, I can make a book and then I can send it to people. The process of making and sending is different. In conversation, it's sort of like simultaneous. So I don't even know. I would sort of make that like a null entry if it were me.
Well, what I'm thinking, like, if I'm at home alone and I'm like, need to talk to somebody about something important, but I don't want to text them, so I have to go to them.
Oh, okay. So to make, if you think of distribution in the sense of reaching an audience, really just depends on like literally where you are at any given moment. Okay.
Or she has more control of that.
Oh, so in that case, instead of making it a null, like I was saying, it's sort of, you're saying go the other way, which is that this occupies the full range. Like right now in this moment, it's easy for any of us to have face-to-face conversations. Maybe we don't want to have face-to-face conversations with any of the people in our space though, and we have to go drive to wherever to have the conversation. So it really is sort of the whole range. Film, how easy is it to get a film out there into the hands of the viewing public? Hard, it's very hard. Talk to anybody who works in Hollywood and they'll tell you it's very hard.
Well, like a quality film, but I mean, Steven Seagal has been pumping out like once a month for quite a while.
Well, that's not distribution, that's creation, right? Film has all the same problems as books in terms of getting it out there. Now, both books and films, I at least have been thinking with books about the material, like an actual physical book, and it might look different if we start talking about ebooks. I think that I am so sorry, Stephanie was just making sure that we're still here, because she's going to come over. Let's look at like 2 or 3 more of these, because I think the point is starting to get made about the question of distribution. Let's see here. Email. How easy is it to distribute email? It's, like literally you just type an address and then like it's in the hands of the receiver. What about blogs? How easy is it to distribute a blog? Make it available to your audience. It's like once it's on the web, it's available. Now, are they going to find it? That's a separate issue. But in terms of making it available to them, it's different from like books in 1985, where the only way you could get your writing in the hands of somebody is if like a publisher was like, oh, this is good, and then I'm going to spend a lot of money and print it, and then somebody has to buy it, right? You see how those are 2 different problem sets? What about like Twitter? How easy is it to get your message into the hands of your audience on Twitter? 1. What about, I think that's true of Facebook too. What about the Telegraph? I don't even know what distribution means in terms of the Telegraph.
Well, like they would do it, and then like the telegraph would have to go somewhere. It wasn't like there was a person, they were talking directly to them. You would be at a telegraph station, they would transcribe it, and then they would go deliver it to the...
So there's more steps involved, right? So what do we want to give that? I mean, I would give it 5 because I don't understand how telegraphs work. I mean, I understand in principle. Let's say like the higher end of the spectrum, like a 3 to 5 or something like that. Okay, number of possible creators. How many possible creators can you have on, say, a book?
Many.
Several, many, greater than 10? Greater than 100?
No, probably would be like between 1 and probably like 7 or 10.
So books we generally see with like more than 1, but a finite number of authors, like a sort of small finite, let's say. What about a face-to-face conversation? How many people can we have in a face-to-face conversation before it stops being a face-to-face conversation?
Yourself.
What?
Lots of people.
1? No, I'm kidding. Lots of people
10.
in a face-to-face, but is it still a face-to-face conversation if you have hundreds?
No, it would be probably more like a small group.
3, 2. I mean, think about the last party you went to where you were in like a group conversation. Lena. So sad. You're just like, I don't have a big party. You just made me choke on my own spit, you know. Great. Okay, so again, with the face-to-face conversation, there's some kind of small, finite number of creators. What about film? How many creators might you have on a film? Think about the last time you saw Pixar credits.
So you're including
Lots.
everyone involved in creating.
Because the film wouldn't be what it was if it weren't for all those people involved in creating it. It's, Pixar easily is in the multiple thousands, right? So like, I'm just gonna go with lots, right? Skype, how many people can meaningfully participate in a Skype conversation? You see where I'm going with this, right? There's a big, big range. Do you see any of these categories where we could definitely limit the number of possible creators to 1 or 2? Probably again, I can think of examples where you'd have lots and lots of people involved in deciding what the message is or something, but only one person is actually writing the telegraph, probably.
An email or something.
I would think this category right here probably is the most limited set, right? Now, email, you might have a lot of creators involved for like a e-newsletter, but that's a really specific genre within email. Most emails only have one creator, right? And then most snail mail, again, a mass market mail out from a politician is going to have lots of creators. But most letters, it's just me writing a letter to you, the general use of the medium. So within media, you can imagine even if there's a lot of possible numbers or a lot of possible answers in terms of difficulty, we might sort of settle on how that media is generally used. What about something like Facebook? How many creators on Facebook? A Facebook message? One. I think this is the one that we can most easily keep to one. Although again, organizations have Facebook and lots of people have access to them, right? I'm an administrator on our Graduate Assistants United Facebook page, our union here on campus, and so there's like 6 of us administrators, so we can all create content for it. But again, that's a special case. Most of Facebook is just one person creating. And LinkedIn, I think, is probably the same way for non-company pages. Twitter is probably the same way for non-organizational pages, etc. Instagram, same. And then this is, to me, the category that's the most interesting, which is the size of the possible audience. What's the size of the possible audience for a book? Not even thinking necessarily realistically. Like all the people, I guess, who can read, maybe?
And then, over time.
Over time, all the people who can read from now till ever. Yes. So, I mean, this is like big finite, right? Face-to-face conversation. What is the size of the possible audience? Conversation, not speech, not lecture. Yeah, it's whatever this number is, right? It's the same number. What about radio? What's the size of the possible audience for radio? Yeah, so for a long time, radio was limited by sort of population density within a geographical area, right? Well, really a geographical radius. And then extrapolating the area. But now, I listen to NPR on my phone on an app, so it's the internet. So if it's like classic radio, then it's this, and if it's internet radio, then it's everyone, basically, right? The point I am trying to make is that we have a couple of internet technologies, internet-based technologies, that keep our possible audience relatively limited. So like email, what's the size of your possible audience?
I mean, my work group has like 85 people on it.
85, whoever they... Okay, what you just said, Chris, is harking back to this idea of rhetorical ecologies. So my email, I might have a possible audience for that email of the 85 people on the work email. I don't know what the limit is. I am 100% certain that like Gmail has a limit on the number of recipients you can send it to. There's some kind of technological limit on that. I don't know what it is, but there has to be. But what you just said, Chris, is the moment I send that to my audience, they can then pass it on to whomever they want. And that's the effect of the rhetorical ecology. We've moved outside of my rhetorical situation. Now we're in a network, we're in an ecology. I'm not in charge of that anymore. And if you think about that possibility for that email to like go viral or whatever, all of a sudden, even though email is thought of as like a pretty closed system with a limited creator and audience, the moment something is on the internet, the audience, the potential audience, becomes everyone. Okay. The Barbara Warnick piece that I asked you to read, and I'm really just going to talk for like 5 minutes. I have a couple of slides. I think there's 4 slides maybe. And then we're going to spend the last 5 minutes looking at the assignment sheet for the digital rhetoric assignment. Don't worry, we're going to spend a lot more time on it in class next week. I just want to give you a heads up of the things to be thinking about because our community partner, Maya McGuire, is coming to class next week. And we're going to be talking through the assignment sheet with her and brainstorming ideas for what to do for that project, if you recall from the first day of class. That project is very freeform. You'll be coming up with your own work in teams. And so I just want to give you some thoughts that might help you guide preparing for that class next week. Okay, so Barbara Warnick, that piece on internet and the public sphere, the exigence, if you will, to which she's responding in writing that piece is this history over the last, particularly since the World Wide Web, but even before the web with the rise of the internet, this tendency for people to divide into two camps. The internet and the web are the worst. They're going to destroy our relationships. They're going to make us incapable of reading books and engaging in sustained argumentation and truly empathizing with other people, and it's just terrible. Versus the techno-utopians who say, this is great. Now that we have this way for everyone to communicate with everyone, our democracy is going to be better. We're going to be able to learn more about each other. We're going to be able to develop more empathy with each other. And people really do split into these camps. I could list for you right now theorists who split into one of those two camps. Warnick is trying to take a middle road. She tells us web authors can use the medium for good or ill. If that sounds familiar, it should, because I think at some point in every class so far, almost every class so far this semester, Carl and I have said some version of rhetoric is a pharmacon. Rhetoric can be used for good or ill. The web as a technology is the same way, according to Warnick, and I happen to agree with her. Warnick also tells us that even though that is a familiar statement about rhetoric, right, or that also applies to rhetoric, and even though it seems like we can do a lot of the same things on the internet that we've done previously. So I can take a book and write it, and instead of going to a publisher, I can just put it on the internet. So even though we can do a lot of the same kinds of things that we used to do in print on the internet, I used to send a snail mail, now I send an email. The actual affordances of the web mean that even if the exact same piece of writing that I would have originally printed, I'm now just putting on the web, they're different. Even if it's like literally the exact same words. The way she puts it is the affordances of the internet and the web can play a significant role in shaping the rhetorical appeal of message content and channeling user response to it. And I would argue that, and this is why I used the 4 categories that I did for us to think about these technologies. There are 4 main differences between the web and traditional media for communication. This is drawn in part from some of her examples, in part from my own thoughts. First of all, the global scope. This is the everyone to everyone, right? The speed of availability and distribution. So the fact that I can, when we were talking about ease of creation and ease of distribution, I didn't define ease for you, but if you think about it, a lot of the way you were attributing the numbers had to do with how long it would take me to hit publish and then have it be available to my readers, right? Publish on Facebook is very different from publish with Oxford Book Press, right? 2 very different kinds of publishing, and that has to do with speed. Also, the opportunity for interactivity. This is the discussion boards that I think Mary suggested we put up there. That we have this chance to make discourse happen in real time, as opposed to you write a letter to the editor and it made me angry, so I have the exigence to write a letter to the editor and get angry back at you. Now we can do it second by second in the comments section on HuffPo. Right? And then finally, the access to the means of production. We talked a lot about how access matters. So Skype is really easy if you own a laptop. Skype is much more difficult if you don't own a computer at all. Access to the means of production is all the more important to content creators in the age of the internet than it was when your first step to communicating with a large audience was putting pencil to paper. 2 very different things. So this is what makes the audience or the internet different. And then finally, I want to call your attention to, and this is incredibly relevant to the project we're doing. Warnick talks about all these examples of how the internet has actually been productive in social movements, right? She talks about Greenpeace, for example, and the ways in which they use the internet to support their wider social movements. And I want to break down a distinction between what I'm calling activism, engagement, and awareness raising. These are not pure categories. I think of this more as a continuum. Awareness raising is the idea of spreading knowledge to individuals. If this sounds a lot like the problems that lead us to the rationalist paradox, you're onto something, right? If I'm engaged in an awareness-raising campaign, that means I'm just trying to put information out there into people's hands in hopes that they do the right thing. The next level that the internet allows us to work with is what I'm thinking of as engagement, personal engagement with an issue. So I can invite you, instead of just pushing information at you on my website, I can invite you to comment on that information. That's engagement. You can tell me how you feel about it. And then that gives me a chance to interact with you and try and appeal to something like, oh, that information wasn't appealing to you, let me try something else. Oh, you value this thing. Now I can speak to that because we have a chance to engage with each other. And then finally, activism, which is where you see, for example, Greenpeace and some of the examples that Warnick uses, using that level of engagement in order to further engage people in political communities. Again, this is a spectrum. And I give you this terminology only so that as you're thinking about the projects that you might do for the Florida Microplastics Awareness Company, this is the point I was making about like awareness is like attitudinal change from the rationalist paradox, and activism is like behavioral change. As you're thinking about the work that you might do for the Florida Microplastics Awareness Project, you need to be conscious of where on the spectrum it falls. Are you just trying to create some information to push? Are you trying to create opportunities for engagement? Are you trying to create opportunities for activism? Because that'll help you and your team figure out which of those technologies are most suitable. Do I just want to make a static web page, or do I want to recommend that they have a discussion board? Like, oh wow, there's nowhere on this website where the public can actually engage or learn how to become an activist. Like, they're missing that. The whole thing is just awareness raising. So I really want to recommend that they create some other opportunities on the spectrum. Make sense? Okay, I promised I didn't have a lot to say. Slacktivism. Have you heard of slacktivism? Yeah, it's the idea that people who are just like on Twitter and tweeting about things and like doing political engagement work on the internet is somehow a slacker version of activism. Like, it only counts as activism if you are out in the streets doing things physically. Basically, I think that's wrong for a lot of reasons, not least of which because of the concept of rhetorical ecologies, which tells us that all instances of rhetoric matter, right? Every piece of rhetoric you put out there, every rhetorical action you take, whether it's online, whether it's face-to-face conversation, whether it's me protesting with a placard, every one of those bits of rhetorical work affects the network. And so slacktivism, I think, is an overly dismissive word for the work and the media that brought us the Arab Spring, that brought us Black Lives Matter. I could go on. The digital engagement and participation assignment sheet looks a lot like the accommodation one. It's available under the modules, just the same. Definitely review the assignment overview, I think, so that you have a sense of the people that we're going to be working with and the person that we're going to be talking to next week. And the part I wanted to highlight for you is this right here. So this is the part to focus on. What we're going to do next week with Maya, in part, is we're going to brainstorm potential projects for teams so that you can then tell us which ones you're interested in working on and we can make the teams. So you'll know by week after next what team you're on. And to help you think about what kinds of things would make good projects, we have created some categories. So one of the things your team might do is what we're calling evaluate and recommend. So I'm going to go look at their website and I'm going to make some recommendations for how they improve it, right? Whether that's awareness raising, oh, they don't have any information explaining what a microplastic is. We need to add some information to help with that awareness raising. Or it's, wow, you don't have any opportunities for engagement, like maybe we should work on that. It's just recommending. You're not like making a thing, you're not fixing it yourself, you're just making a recommendation. Analyze and make. So you realize like, man, they don't have any like cool videos that would be interesting for kids. Like, my team wants to actually make a video. And then you don't have to spend as much time explaining recommendations and stuff. You just like make a video that they can then put on their Facebook page. And then the third option is like go out and act. They have the citizen science component where they get people signed up to actually go out and sample for microplastics. So maybe you actually go out and try to get 10 people signed up, and then your report is going to be about whether or not that was successful and what you think worked or didn't work, so that they have some strategies for going out and trying to get citizens involved. So you're gonna do a project that fits into one of these 3 categories, and you're gonna write a proposal for us telling us what your team is gonna do. That's due the week after spring break. And then you're gonna write up a report of what you did that's due during finals week. On your syllabus, you have probably already seen, because you guys are super on top of things, all we're asking you to read next week is to look at their stuff online, the Facebook group, the Facebook page, the website. And I wanted to point you to this so that as you're looking at them, go ahead and just be brainstorming. Like when you see something, you're like, that's terrible. Like, I can't believe they have the Facebook logo. This is real. They have a Facebook logo that is not a link. Like you look at it and you're like, I want to go to the Facebook page, and you click on it and it doesn't do anything. And then you go to the paragraph below and it says the word Facebook, and that's a link. So when you see that stuff and it bothers you, write it down and bring that list to class with you on Thursday. And we'll talk about that stuff with Maya and figure out what some of the projects are.